Hello and welcome to YHTV's nominated show, Magical Medical Tour. This is episode 94. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christina Suzaman. With me is our wonderful medical guide, Dr. Glenn Woolman. What's up, Doc?
Don't start with me.
It should be What's Up, Docs, today.
Yeah, exactly. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Magical Medical Tour. I'm Dr. Glenn Woolman. I will be your medical guide, along with Christina today, as we travel through another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy, searching for optimal health. And today I'm, as always, excited, but doubly excited because I have two very special people with me. The title of the show is World-Class Medicine, World-Class Doctors. And you're going to see why this happens to be. We have with us today Debbie Weinstein and Jason Prostowski, both physicians in emergency medicine. But before we go on and introduce them, Christina, would you like to take care of our laundry?
Our laundry. Which basket shall we do today? Please feel free to ask a question or make a comment just simply by scrolling down on your screen and typing it into the comment box. And if you're not viewing this online, maybe it's through an iPod or something, you can simply call us at 818-LETS-TALK. 818-LETS-TALK. And be sure to let us know how we can reach you and respond to your question or comment. Now, your question or comment can be with any of our guests, Dr. Woolman, myself, and we will be sure to pass it along to them. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Oh, you're welcome. I would like to spend a lot of time introducing Dr. Weinstein and Dr. Prostowski, but I would rather be talking with them. I just want to say that not only are they emergency medicine doctors, and you know how much we love that and how much fun that usually is for us, but these are also people that independently have gone and done community medicine also, and they go when there's a disaster or a war somewhere in the world, and we watch it on our televisions or on our iPads and pods and everything else and just listen to it. These are two people that actually pack their bags and go to these places where big disasters happen and war zones, and we're going to talk with them about that today. And I want to hear a lot of great stories, and I know we will. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleagues and friends, Dr. Debbie Weinstein and Dr. Jason Prostowski. Greetings, Debbie and Jason.
Hi, how you doing?
Peace.
Welcome to the show. Our heroes. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. Thanks, Glenn.
They are heroes, I'm telling you. So just so that both of you know, the first part of the show, as the medical guide, I try to tell people where we're going to go with the show. So in the first few minutes of the show, I want to find out a little bit about each of you and basically why and what influenced you in going just into the career of medicine. After that, we'll talk a little bit about emergency medicine and we'll share some stories. Each of you can give some stories, talk a little bit about the community work that you do. And then I want to get into a part that we have not had the opportunity to speak with others about on a level that we'll get to speak with you about what happens when you go to a natural disaster in the world and what happens if you're in a war zone. These are things that I think might be very interesting for all of us and for our global community. So let's start with that. Debbie, what got you interested in medicine?
My parents are physicians, so I swore I was never going to medical school. So I actually,
Excellent.
I stayed in my adolescent rebellion for way too long. And so I went to graduate school instead and did neuroscience. And then the light bulb went off and I realized that I was much more interested in working with the actual people that had the illnesses and not doing the research. So went back to school and on to medical school.
Oh, nice. Jason?
Very similar to Debbie's story. I come from a big family of physicians, and they told me that I was going to go to medical school, and I said, hell no, I'm going to get a PhD in philosophy. I'm going to go off and save the world. I want to be a person of ideas. And I worked here locally in Santa Barbara as an EMT on a local ambulance company. And the same group of physicians that I work with now here in Santa Barbara, California, convinced me to go to medical school. And in medical school, I went to night school to get my master's degree in public health because as doing pre-hospital care and taking care of providing health care to people in their homes, you get a little bigger picture as far as the public health, all of these different social factors that go into determining someone's health. And, I went into pre-hospital medicine like any young man does because you get to drive trucks fast and wear a uniform and lights and sirens and look cool. And I really fell in love with that personal touch, like Debbie was talking about, the human condition, that sacred relationship that you develop when having the privilege to take care of someone who's sick.
Mm.
One of those people that you mentioned that influenced you was Dr. Bob Gayu, who we interviewed on this show, and I would recommend everybody go back and watch that ER interview. Jason, did you say that while you were just hanging out in medical school, you went and got a master's degree in public health also?
Yeah, I was. I don't recommend that. It was not very good for my wellness. I may do a better service for the communities in helping them become healthier now. But I sure wasn't healthier at the time doing both at the same time.
Wow, I'm impressed. So you go through medical school, Jason, and then there are so many specialties. Why did you pick emergency medicine?
I thought I was going to be a trauma surgeon like Hawkeye Pierce. I just figured, Hawkeye Pierce was my hero. I watched MASH and I said, I want to be that guy. And someone gave me some really valuable advice. And they said, if it feels more like fun than it does work, then that's what you should go into. And going into the operating theater felt like work, but being in the emergency department felt like fun. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, I was ready to drop out of medical school because I just thought the whole healthcare industry was just full of really shady, dodgy people. And then I found this group of people who were running a free clinic in West Chicago and also going to Latin America. And that's when I really developed a passion for underserved communities and realized, there's more to medicine than what we see with the Affordability Care Act, or what we see in a modern hospital. There actually is something a lot more to it. And there's a lot of really amazing people that go to where the need is. And when I say where the need is, I'm not just talking about disasters, which is I know where the conversation's going, but also these kind of chronic disasters that happen right in our own backyards with underserved communities.
Very good point. Debbie, why emergency medicine when you were a neuroscientist?
Well, it's interesting. So again, similar story to Jason. I wanted to be a surgeon. I loved the immediacy of you open somebody up, you fix them, close them up, done. And I also got some good advice in my 4th year of medical school from a colleague who said, if you go into surgery, you might love it, but you'll also be signing your life away and you won't have time for anything else. And right then I knew I had aspirations to not only volunteer and do medicine outside of this country and like Jason, help take care of the folks right here with need. And I knew that emergency medicine would not only be fun and exciting, but allow me the flexibility in my career.
So you've been in that career for at least 15 years now. I'm sure that you can share a story. This is the part that everybody loves, when they hear ER stories, tales from the pit. Share a story with us, Deb, something that influenced you in the emergency department.
This was just, there are some tragic stories, of course, that stick with you. And then there's some really funny and happy stories. And so speaking of EMT firemen, we had a small child. He was about 4 years old, and he'd come in. He was having a foul-smelling drainage from his nose, and his mother said, I think he put something up there. And I said, all right. So we took a look, and I found a little plastic fireman that I pulled out of his nose. And as I always do, I check again to make sure, no significant bleeding or foreign bodies or anything remaining. Looked in again, there was something else. So I went back in, pulled out a fire truck. And I sort of looked at the little boy and somewhat incredulous. He said, well, I had to send the firemen in to get the truck.
Oh.
So just, and his parents
His logic was totally sound.
It was. I mean, of course, because the truck was stuck.
Oh man!
Oh my gosh, that
Up
is a
his
great story.
nose.
Up his nose. You'd be amazed at what they put up their noses.
And how many they can put up there
Yeah.
over
Oh,
a
yeah.
period of time before mom gets a handle on it.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
if
frightening.
you think about it, it takes a little, you know, Debbie was bringing up the symptom that brought him in, which was the foul-smelling drainage. So that doesn't happen instantly. You don't put a fireman up your nose. Well, I don't even know. I don't even know how to say that. Don't put anything up your nose and it instantly starts draining. It takes
Right. It
sometimes
takes, yeah.
days to a week, or
Wow.
it
But
could
how
take a
can
while.
a parent not even notice that? Doesn't it bump out?
I give medical advice, but I never give parenting advice or relationship advice. That's just, as an emergency physician, I'm always happy to give medical advice, but I never tell parents how they should parent.
Debbie, it would have been interesting. Yeah, that is actually great advice and wisdom, Jason. Debbie, I wonder if it would have been interesting to maybe sound an alarm by his nose and see if the fireman came out on his own.
Yeah, came sliding down a pole or something, right?
Or her own. So Jason, how about a story from you?
You know, it's funny listening to Debbie tell that story and knowing that you had an amazing career in emergency medicine. You know, in emergency medicine, we have this really unique window of the community, and I work nothing but overnight. So I'm the nocturnist. I'm the night guy in the emergency room, and there's tons of stories of the adrenaline and the blood in the guts. There's tons of stories of the someone stuck something where, and you know, but the stories that really haunt me and the ones that really keep me up at night are the ones that kind of happen every day. And one of the things that I'm really proud of being an emergency physician is not the fact that we're here as a safety net providing great emergency care, but the fact that we don't turn anyone away. And that to me is a really badge of honor. That in my career, and I know in Debbie's career in emergency medicine, not once have we ever told someone, "Oh, you can't afford our services, you need to go somewhere else." We see everyone. And it's the, you know, there's plenty of funny and exciting stories, and at cocktail parties after a couple drinks they always come out. But it's the stories of the mom that's bringing her kid into the emergency room at 1 o'clock in the morning because she works 3 jobs just to make ends meet and can't afford to take a day off of work to take her child to the pediatrician. So she's taking her child to the emergency department at 1 o'clock in the morning because she's poor, she's uneducated, and she's scared. And all mothers love their kids, and when they get scared, they don't know what to do. And we offer that service. It's the person that comes to the emergency room because they have diabetes or high blood pressure, and they can't afford their medications. So they wait until it gets so bad that they are in the emergency room. And now I'm their primary care doctor. And you know, and that's what's really kind of frustrating to me is that emergency medicine, especially emergency medicine at night, gives us a little bit of a window to the people in our community whose needs are not being met. And we in the emergency department really scramble to be all things to all people 24/7. You know, we offer trauma services, cardiology services, neurology services, orthopedic services, mental health services, social services, whatever someone needs in that acute phase. We do the best we can with what we have to help them. And you know, I know it's not a very sexy topic, but I feel like as an emergency physician, that's a story that we really should be telling. Is we're taking care of a lot of people that the rest of the community and society really isn't, and sometimes should. So sorry to be a downer, Glenn.
Total downer, Jason. I'd like to cancel the rest of the show because if you're going to continue to answer questions like that,
I've already gotten gonged. It's only been a few minutes. I love it.
We might like Debbie's stories more. But no, actually, that's a really good point. I worked the night shift for many years, and Debbie worked the night shift. And there's something very special about that. You do see people that you might not normally see under normal circumstances, and it's a great thing to be part of that. And I like that you brought up how in emergency medicine we do much more than emergency medicine. And speaking of that, I know each of you does a lot of things in the community. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because most of the time people that went into emergency medicine do it so they can work and then go away and play. But you guys do more than that. You guys and dolls, ladies, the way we figure that out. You both do more than just emergency medicine. You take more of your time and go out into the community and do things. Jason, what do you do in the community?
Well, thank you for the question, Glenn. And I think one of the great things that I'm sure Debbie can attest to, being an emergency physician, is that our job is so much fun that it kind of, I'm lucky that they pay me to do it, because I'd probably do it for free. I hope Bob's not listening to this right now. But what we do is just so much fun. I made a career before moving back. I moved back to Santa Barbara 3 years ago, and before I moved back, I had spent, like you were talking about, time in war and in conflict and post-conflict. And when I came back here, I had this extraordinary skill set of working with people displaced by war, working with people that society wished they would go away, refugees, political. The political pooped upon, and I came to Santa Barbara, and I fell into this nonprofit called Doctors Without Walls, Santa Barbara Street Medicine, which provides free medical care to the homeless, the indigent, the working poor, out of mobile clinics. And we have a backpack full of medicines, a backpack full of wound care. We go set up clinics in parks. We set up clinics behind dumpsters, and we bring medical care to the people who we think need it the most, and who ordinarily, without us there, would come to the emergency department to get care. And it's a true passion of mine. I'm the medical director. We have students that are college students, high school students, recent graduates, who come, and we teach them community organizing and sort of the philosophy behind humanitarian medicine. And they go off to become doctors and nurses and hopefully congressmen and senators, and with this valuable skill set. It's a true passion of mine, and it's wonderful to be able to give back to the community, to be able to be in the ER at night and see what the community needs, and then be down in the trenches with a backpack full of medications and a mobile clinic and a bunch of really inspired volunteers to improve the quality of medical care in our own community.
Wow.
Christina, you can see why we love emergency medicine.
Oh,
and
yeah.
emergency medicine
I'm
doctors,
bouncing.
huh?
I'm bouncing.
All right. Jason, you've gotten Christina excited. Nice work.
Wow. Very nice.
Come on out and volunteer with us, Christina. We're waiting. We're ready.
Hey! I may be going on one of those trips at the end of the year to Thailand with Poonam Chowdhury. So who's another ER doctor who travels the world in these clinics as well. So I'm ready.
Perfect. Debbie, you, aside from working in emergency medicine and working in clinics, you have some other special things that you do in the community. You want to tell us a little about that?
Sure. But first off, just a huge thank you to Jason for that organization in Santa Barbara. What a huge gift that organization provides the community. Applaud your efforts. And I'm going to come down and volunteer.
Thank you. We were. I was just waiting. I was hoping that you would say that. So you left. And now I don't have to go through the groveling of asking.
I've actually met a few of your volunteers who've come on other humanitarian trips and have talked about the organization, and nothing but all good things. Amazing. So there are a couple of things I do here. One is a cancer camp. Camp Keepsake, that's out of, it was initially out of Calabasas, now it's out of Ojai, that's every year. And I am the staff physician as well as the medical director for the organization. It's an entirely volunteer organization that is for cancer victims and their families. And it's for them to have a weekend of activities that don't involve cancer. So there are spa treatments, there's a climbing wall, there's archery, you name it, we have it. And it just helps them to sort of get away from cancer for a weekend. And then in addition, something that's very near and dear to my heart is the Santa Ynez Youth Coalition, which is a group of community volunteers. I just stepped down as chairperson that we do our best to educate kids about drugs and the downside to drugs. I'm sure Jason has seen this, Glenn, you've seen this, where young people come in after having overdosed, particularly recently on prescription medications. And I had a young 16-year-old die in the emergency department after a farm party is what it's called. Anyway, so we go into the schools, we go into the community, we educate parents, we educate the kids, teachers with regards to drug and alcohol abuse.
Wow.
Oh, thank you. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Sure.
Wow.
This is great. This is
Mm,
just great. I love this.
If you ever
on
want to
all
swap
levels.
volunteers, do a little bit of like a
Yeah.
foreign exchange, and like we'll
Let's
take
do
some of yours, you take some of ours for a little bit. I'm down. Yeah.
I'm conflicted now, I must say. I had a lot more questions, but I'm thinking that it would be really fun to listen to Jason groveling to ask Debbie something. So I'm not sure what I should do about that. What do you think, Deb?
Oh, by all means.
I think you should ask a question, Glenn.
Okay, then let's get to the next part. Like I said, we've talked with emergency medicine physicians, and we've heard stories and community people, and you guys are just icons in the field, making it all look beautiful for the rest of us and helping the communities with asking very little in return, which is so wonderful in itself. I want to get into the next level of what you do, because most of us that work in medicine are really localized. Someone has an office here and they work with whatever local community they live in. But you both have taken this whole medicine thing to a completely different level. You go around the world and take care of people in their times of need. And I want to talk about that. And I want to hear just a general impression of how you got interested in that, each of you. And then I want to talk a little bit about what's necessary. You could include, maybe is there certain training that you need to do this? And then I want you to also answer somewhere along the way. I'll ask the question again in a few minutes, but how other physicians that might be listening to this show, or nurses or other people in healthcare, can get into the same thing. So, Debbie, why don't you start? Tell us what got you interested in world medicine and how you go about it, and then we'll tell some stories in a little while.
Okay, great. Thank you. It actually began with a mutual friend of ours, Eric McFarland, Dr. McFarland. He and I were working at Lompoc, and he mentioned he did aeromedicos and would I like to tag along? And I said, by all means. And so this was back in 1999. And I actually met Bob Gayu through Aeromedicos, and we've been good friends. He's just amazing. So a number of folks were involved in this organization. And I realized right then and there that it was my passion. There was no doubt that this was going to become my real career. My ER medicine funds my real career, as I'm sure is the same with Jason. So that just morphed into going on other trips with other colleagues all around the world, other organizations. And with regards to training, with the groups I've been with, there's no specific training, with the exception of the disaster medicine through an organization called Medical Teams International that did require a brief. It's called the IMCI, the Integrated Management of Childhood Illnesses, a brief review they wanted you to be aware of before you went out, but specifically no specific training. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jason, how about you?
Well, I got my career in global health really started when I was a medical student working in Chicago, where I was so frustrated by, again, the sole infrastructure, that I found great joy and great fulfillment taking care of sort of the inner city, underserved minority communities and immigrant communities. And that led to me doing my residency training in Atlanta. And I ended up leaving my academic job to go to sub-Saharan Africa for an organization called Doctors for Global Health, and then went to live on the Navajo Indian Reservation for a year, which, when I look back on my career, at the time it seemed very schizophrenic, like I was making all these bizarre career decisions, but now they all kind of flow together because they're all linked by this idea of that there's something very inherently wrong with our healthcare system. And a lot of us that go into medicine with these very noble ideals. We really want to help people. And the politics of the industry really sometimes makes that a challenge. And when you can go to places where there's a philosophical purity, where you take away a lot of the bureaucracy bureaucracy where it's just someone's sick and you have the know-how and the tools to help them feel better. There's something that's just very pure and very ancient and very sacred about that. The highlight of my career, and I wish I had done a formal course like Debbie was saying. My dream was to one day join Doctors Without Borders, which I had the privilege of doing, and I spent 9 months in South Sudan in active conflict, and it was, to me, I mean, that's the NFL. That's how every kid that throws a baseball one day dreams of pitching at Wrigley Field. Sorry, Fenway fans out there. This is why we go into medicine, is to go. If you want to do the greatest good, you have to go to where there's a need. And I went there, and it was AK-47 trauma injuries. I mean, 1 in 10 women died in childbirth, and we were doing all of this obstetrics and women's health. There was a measles outbreak. There was a polio outbreak. There was famine. 15% of children under the age of 5 were severely malnourished. It was the most exhausting, the most frustrating, the most exhilarating, the most inspiring experience that I'd ever had. It's like you take, and it was the stuff of poets, and it launched me into a career in global health, where I went from working for Doctors Without Borders to working for USAID, doing post-conflict development work, helping new governments develop emergency healthcare infrastructure after the war had ended. And
Nice.
and it's interesting because when you think about training and skill sets, the one real advantage emergency physicians have in these kind of settings is emergency physicians, and I see Debbie nodding over there in the corner, is we make very rapid resource-based decisions. We're the only physicians out there that when you give us a problem, but before we tackle that problem, we look to see what's in the cupboard, to see what resources we have at our fingertips. And we make a very rapid decision based on the resources we have. And that's something that emergency physicians do really well. We do it every day in the emergency department. And when you go off into these environments of extraordinary depravity and austerity, my mentor with Médecins Sans Frontières once told me, you don't sign up for the job, you sign up for the constraints. And you go to this environment where there's nothing but mountains beyond mountains to hurdle, and what you have is your innovativeness, your passion, the people you surround yourself by, your comrades and your team, and you say, okay, let's get through the day, and that philosophy, it really filled me up, and it gave me something that I was missing in my academic career, and then when I came back to the United States, and I'm kind of bringing it full circle, in order to continue to do this, to be fulfilled and to be filled as a physician, I had to continue to do it in my local community. And that's where, like Debbie, I got involved doing that same humanitarian work, but just doing it locally with the working poor and the homeless.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. We learn about people nowadays that have an attention span of 1.5 seconds, and I get a lot of advice that tell us to have a much shorter show because people can only pay attention for a few seconds. But as both of you are speaking, I'm sitting here thinking, I wish we had a 4-hour show today.
This is what we call episodic, Glenn.
Well,
exactly. maybe part of the problem with our society is that it's not that we should cater to the short attention span. Maybe we should have longer attention spans when people are talking about important things that matter.
Exactly, and that's why we continue this show at the level we do. And you're making it obvious as to why we do that. I want to ask you both, those are great stories, and we're going to get into some real detail in some of those things. But before we do that, I want a couple of technical answers. People that want to help out and go to another country to help in a war zone or in a natural disaster. There are two types of people. One is the person who has knowledge of healthcare, like a physician, a nurse, an acupuncturist, a chiropractor, a healer. And the others are people that just want to go. How do people get connected to some of these organizations rather than just, there's a tsunami in Thailand, I'm just going to get on a plane? What's the best way to go about it, Debbie?
Great question, because I actually get asked that a lot, whether it's spin class or the bank. How do I get involved? How do I? I would say, first of all, you don't need to be medical. to do any of these trips. There are a large number of organizations that not only want but need non-medical people to help with logistics and dispensing meds and things like that. But I would start with the internet unless you actually know somebody. Whether it be a nurse or a friend of the family or someone who's done this, and they're a great resource. But otherwise, if you just Google medical missions or medical volunteerism, there are so many of these organizations come up, and you start by contacting them and finding out details like how much it's going to cost you, the duration of the trip, what vaccines you might need, and that sort of thing, and then go from there.
Jason, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, I just met Debbie, and everything she says, I agree with it. So I'm making it a point to agree with everything Debbie says. It's a great question. And,
we all do that.
We used to say, when I used to work in Haiti and Mongolia and Uganda and Sudan, and we used to always say that the people that go into global health are the M's, the mercenaries who do it for the money, the missionaries who do it for their spirituality, the misfits who do it for their rock and roll ideology, or the mindful. And my advice is be the mindful. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, at the end of the day, there's so many great intentions and great people who want to do wonderful things. But at the end of the day, it's not about us. It's not about me. It's not about what I want and what I need. It's about the people we're serving. It's about the community we're serving. And what can I do that can improve the quality of health for these people that are either living in a chronically horrible situation or have just experienced a horrible trauma, whether it be a tsunami, an earthquake, or a war. And be mindful and be reflective. Don't just put on a backpack and jump on a plane, because then you're in the way. And the United Nations has really wonderful algorithms to calculate you as a Western provider. How much food, water, and shelter do you take in order to be there? And are you worth it? In other words, could a local person be doing what you do, and all that food and water and hotel rooms that you are taking, was that better served by the local community? And there's ways to calculate that. We always, there's a great Lao Tzu quote about how do you improve the quality of health in the community? And it goes, go to the people, live among them, love them, learn from them. Start with what you know, work with what they have, but in the end, the people will say, we've done it ourselves. And go there with that collaborative spirit. Find an organization whose ideologies you believe in and are allied with, and you can go there as a team and actually be effective at improving the quality of health for whatever community you're working with. Go there if you are good at banking. You know what? All of these nonprofits need to keep their books straight. Go help them develop their finances. If you are good at fixing things, go with a group and help them keep the generator running in the hospital. The reality is, you have to go with what you know and work with what they have, and keep in the back of your mind, at the end of the day, it's not about my experience. That's kind of cool to be able to go to a place and get your photograph taken with African babies. But you want to go and actually be part of the solution. Think about sustainability. Think about the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, the 20-year plan. What are these people going to do when we leave? And keeping in mind all these big ideas. Be mindful. Don't do it for the money. Don't do it do it because you're mindful. And that would be my piece of advice for clinicians and non-clinicians.
Well said. Jason?
I concur.
Yeah. Christina, do you concur?
Oh, yeah. I didn't, when Jason, when you said don't do it for the money, I didn't think there was any money involved in any of this.
You'd be surprised. When I was in Sudan, we used to have different bush pilots that would fly us into war zones. And if bush pilots are a rare breed, they either have they're glassy-eyed missionaries, and they do it because it helps them fulfill their spirituality and their faith, or they do it for the money. And I had one bush pilot, I'm not going to say his name because he may be watching, who used to run guns to Somalia during the American occupation in the early 90s, with a single propeller plane landing on muddy runways, dodging goats and AK-47 fire. But then he realized that if you fly vaccines into humanitarian zones, it's more lucrative. You make more money. So there is a whole non-for-profit industrial complex, and a lot of people are starting to write about it, where people, international aid is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's dark. It feels dirty, the fact that some nonprofits are generating huge amounts of revenue, really at the sad stories and at the suffering of others, and not doing it with that mindful pragmatism at heart.
Yes, we work with a number of those airline ambassadors and vitamin angels and so many other sources like that. I'd like each of you just to name all of the countries you've been to for a moment.
Wow.
I mean, in terms of helping, not in terms of just traveling. And
what about the countries that we've been to but we wish we hadn't? Do we have to name those ones too?
Absolutely. Jason, start. You already mentioned a few. Just name the countries, and then we'll get into some detail.
Nicaragua, Guatemala. This is just practicing medicine, right? Not being a backpack going and having French cheese. So you don't want to hear about Paris when I was in college or anything like that, right? Okay.
That'll be in our
Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, Uganda, Ghana, Honduras, Sudan, the West Bank, Mongolia, the Navajo Indian Reservation, the Lakota Indian Reservation, Antarctica, and I always say, like, if doing street medicine, I always feel like when you start getting into the homeless culture, or if you go out into, if you ever do work with migrant farm workers out in the fields, that's its own little country as well. So I have to include migrant farm worker communities and the homeless communities as different countries also. So there's probably a few more in there, but I'll let Debbie add to the list.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Wow. Okay, yeah. It's similar. Nicaragua, Honduras, Mexico, Haiti, Romania, Africa, so Mozambique, Lebanon. I think that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
have so many questions for you. Were you with the American medical school there in Beirut when you were in Lebanon?
No, we did talk to them. We were with a so that was the Medical Teams International, and we partnered with Humedica out of Germany, just right across the Syrian border. So it was for the Syrian refugee camps.
And when you were in Haiti, were you with Project MetaShare or Partners in Health, or?
No, it's a group called Vision International Missions out of New Hampshire, a smaller organization. But we partnered with some of the larger groups when we were there.
You have to partner with people. I mean, collaboration is part of the solution. I think all too often
huge.
People work in silos, and it's not a very effective way to practice medicine. Anyway, I'm sorry. I know, Glenn, you have a lot more questions. I feel like I can just sit here and ask. I want to take Debbie out for a pint and just listen to her tell stories and just listen to her wisdom.
Want to hear, similarly about some of these countries that I've thought about but haven't been to, Mongolia and some of the other African countries, and just you must have had some amazing experiences.
Wow. So may I ask, each time you choose to go out there, is it a different group or organization that you're going with each time?
For me or for Jason?
For you, and then Jason can answer. Sorry.
Okay. It depends. So I've been with probably half a dozen different organizations to different countries, but then, I will go back. So I've been to Honduras probably 14, 15 times now, but with the same organization. They're quite good. They're called Medico. So really just depends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How about you, Jason?
And I agree. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
Everything Debbie just said, I agree with.
And you do the same.
Okay, you guys are going to have a lot of pints, I can tell.
I know. That's when the real story is. It's too bad you're interviewing us now and not after like the third pitcher, because that's when the gloves off stories are probably going to come out.
That's coming. We didn't tell you. That's part 2.
We have to talk bathrooms in all these countries over the Lagner. I mean, that's just an episode in and of itself.
Well, Debbie, you brought it up. Let's hear one. No, come on.
Okay, so
that was easy.
Yeah, well, I am reminded. So right after the Haitian earthquake, obviously a lot of structures fell, but interestingly, a few of the outhouses remained, which we used. We basically camped, but there were these little metal outhouses that have a cement square in the center. It's sort of a built up. It's like a giant brick with a hole in the middle, and there was no electricity, so there's no light. So at night, it's full of cockroaches. It's probably 110 degrees, and now I will tell you that the height of this cement, I'm 4'4" if I'm lucky, and this came up to about my hips. And I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I gonna? So I just stood on it. This may be too much for your audience, but you just make it work. So in the dark, cockroaches, horrific smell, heat, and standing on a giant square cement block, aiming for the small hole in the center.
You know what's funny, Debbie, listening to that story is I could tell a lot of stories that are the exact same story, and you could just insert whatever country you want to in the beginning of it. It's hot, it smells bad, there's a big concrete slab with a hole in the center. There's gunfire in the background.
Exactly. There's gunfire, and you just got to do what you got to do. And sometimes it's just easier to go behind a bush. It really is. I mean, I know you don't want to hear this, but I've evacuated myself on the roadside in traffic, because at some point when you got to go, you got to go.
Oh my.
It is a testament to the strengths of the quadricep muscles, is having diarrhea in a squat pot foreign country.
Call them squat and
That's probably not what the listeners wanted to hear, right?
No, they want to hear all of this.
Do yoga before you go international health.
Bring
great.
your own porta potty.
Bring a lot of little sandy wipes or tissue.
Wow.
So you both go to disaster areas, and you've both been in war zones, correct? I want to know if you find a difference between a disaster zone and a war zone, and I'll leave it open to you as to what areas those differences might be. Jason?
Well, let me challenge you a little bit, Glenn. When you say disaster, what are you meaning? What is a disaster?
Well, I'm talking about a tsunami, an earthquake, something like that. A natural disaster is what I'm talking about.
And this is something that if I could challenge the viewers to think about the word disaster, for those of us in the industry, disaster management, disaster response, a disaster is any time that the resources needed outweigh the problem at hand. So, and this is, when we think of disaster, we think of the tsunami and the earthquake, and, we think of tornadoes. But I've begun to really challenge the way I view disaster, because I think of disaster. I think about my colleagues who are at Los Angeles County Hospital, where the wait to be seen by a physician is 12 hours. Maybe it's 9 hours now. I mean, that is a disaster. Like when we go out and work, in a contemporary emergency department with our healthcare system being such a mess, there's not enough providers out there providing care, and it's in a lot of ways a chronic disaster. And that's why I honestly believe that emergency physicians do well in disaster environments, because it's always a disaster in the emergency department. There's always far more need than there are people and resources to take care of it. And I find that, and then when I think about disaster, I think about, I divide it into two sort of categories. One is emergency humanitarian aid, and the other is development. Because some disasters, you look at the disaster, and they pick the country, have been going on for 20 years. So with emergency humanitarian aid, it's kind of like the emergency physicians of communities. You go in and you stabilize the situation. If people are starving, you set up a therapeutic feeding center. If people have been crushed under buildings, you set up a bunch of operating rooms and bring in a bunch of surgeons. You stabilize. But once the issue's stable, you're not done. And this is where I get really upset with the way we handled the earthquake in Haiti. You're not done. You have to move to the development stage, which is, okay, the infrastructure has been destroyed. You need to help build up capacity and build up infrastructure. You need to help train physicians and nurses and community health workers. You need to make yourself obsolete. You need to make it so that you are out of there in a few years, and next time you go, you visit as a tourist. And I think too many times people want the glory of that humanitarian aid piece, but don't recognize the absolute essentialness of the development piece. And also for clinicians and non-clinicians who want to volunteer, there are so many disasters that happen every day. Go volunteer in a local homeless clinic. Go volunteer in a migrant farm worker camp. Go volunteer, at some of these school clinics for elementary schools. I mean, there's such a need that outweighs the resources that when you look at definitions, that's a disaster. The other comment is when you look at disaster and you look at impact, when a big earthquake hits Chile, it doesn't cause problems because the underlying population is not fragile. When an earthquake hits Haiti, it's absolutely catastrophic because the underlying population was experiencing a disaster before the earthquake even hit. I always remember the Onion article that came out after the earthquake in Haiti that says, earthquake hits small island off the coast of Florida and millions of Americans realize that there's poor people living there. Is that when you look at, who do the tornadoes hit? The tornadoes don't wreak havoc on the people who live in really nice homes. They wreak havoc on the people who are living in poverty, who have very low income homes. And it's always the underlying vulnerable communities that get hit the worst. And I would like to challenge the viewers to think about disaster, not necessarily in the sexy neo-colonial, I'm going to run off to the aid of the poor people, but to think, okay, there's a disaster goes on every day, and I actually have the tools to be part of the solution, and I'm going to, with mindfulness, participate. So I'll get off my soapbox and hand the conference over to Debbie.
Well, before you do that, I would like to
concur.
say, I would like to say that was a very nice lesson. Debbie, go ahead.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree with Jason. I often get asked, as I'm sure Jason does, isn't what you're doing just a Band-Aid? Just a Band-Aid for the bigger problem? And it is such a complex question and a complex issue. And at times, maybe it is. But as Jason was saying, the real work is in, the typical teach a man to fish, give him a fish and then he eats for a day, teach him to fish and he fishes for life. So that is 100% applicable to these situations. And it's when you're dealing with governments that have no interest in taking care of the underserved in their own countries, and so sometimes the barriers, they are huge. But in my mind, it is much better than just sitting on my couch to get up and do something, no matter how small. As Jason was saying, even if it's just volunteering some of your banking expertise to an organization, you don't have to be medical. Little things, baby steps, and that's
it's interesting. I'm reminded there's a great book that was written by the past president of Doctors Without Borders, James Orbinski, published it in 2008, called An Imperfect Offering. And that was his reflections on a career in humanitarian aid and conflict zones. And the title of the book was An Imperfect Offering. That, when people get hit with the worst case scenario, what do we have to offer? At its best, it's imperfect. When you think about us as emergency physicians, when people come to the emergency room because their blood pressure is out of control, I can get the numbers looking better, but I can't find them a job that will give them the financial resources so they can afford their medications to keep them out of the emergency department in the first place. I'm offering a Band-Aid in the emergency room, and it's frustrating. And we do what we can, and we use our experiences being on the reactive end to be proactive and preventive on the policy and public health end, the way that Debbie does with the amazing work she's doing as well.
I think you're both giving examples of bringing the practice of medicine to such a beautiful high level of consciousness for local and the world, just for people. That's what this is about, and both of you are really expressing this in such a nice way that I think we're all learning lessons from this. I want to, first of all, thank you both for that. And then I want to talk a little bit about, okay, we'll agree that on the concept of disasters, do we have a different concept of war zones?
Well, war zones, I think that war zones and disasters as well bring up the idea of humanitarian space and security. And what humanitarian space is this very obscure, abstract idea of being able to provide humanitarian aid. And what are the physical barriers? I mean, maybe there's boulders that are rolling down the hills, or there's hills or flooding or what. Like Hurricane Katrina, the flooding of New Orleans was a physical barrier to providing humanitarian aid. There's a humanitarian aid. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's military. Sometimes when you think about security, it's dangerous to go into these places. And it's not necessarily dangerous when you look at the spectrum. Maybe it's dangerous because you're in Somalia where aid workers are targeted, or maybe you're in a place like Haiti, where there's so much violence that aid workers get caught in the crossfire. Or maybe you're in a place like East Africa, where the quality of the drivers and the roads are so bad, you're more likely to die in a car crash. But to think about what is the humanitarian space that you're able to provide care. In a war zone, it makes the dynamic much more complicated, because you're not just dealing with the physical barriers and the social barriers and the language barriers, but the military and political barriers. And that sometimes you might be providing care to a group of people that another group of people is trying to exterminate. And that adds an extra layer of challenge to improving the quality of health in communities. And that, if I can do another thing for my clinician colleagues out there, we as clinicians, and I'm not just talking to doctors, but to nurses and social workers and care techs, we have a responsibility to pay attention to what we see and share those stories to the world. That if we're taking care of people that are being oppressed by war or by political influences, and they're sick because they're being shot at or they're being starved out, we have a responsibility to open up our mouths and say, hey, foul. This is what I'm seeing people that they don't need food to feed their bellies. They need food trucks to be allowed into the refugee camp. This is a systematic political action. And that happens in our country as well. When you look at food deserts, when you look at the fact that child obesity is such a problem in inner city minorities, well, you look at where they go to get their food. They're getting their food from liquor stores with all this high carbohydrate, low nutritional crap. Whole Foods is not opening up in any inner cities, and we as physicians say, hey, if we want to combat childhood obesity and childhood diabetes, maybe we need to think about addressing some of these social core determinants of health.
That's right up my alley.
All right. Welcome to the struggle, Christina.
I see it every day. I serve breakfast to the elementary school students every day, and I see what they're eating here in Los Angeles. That's my next effort, is to change that.
But do you have any other thoughts, Debbie, about being in war or being in active conflict?
I agree with everything you said. In the Syrian refugee camps was certainly an experience, because there was this dichotomy between certainly the refugees needing and wanting help, and then their oppressors not so happy about that, and attempting to smooth over the process just to simply provide the basics. And like you said, even allowing the NGO that purified their water to come in and teach them how to use the purification systems, things like that would be blocked. And it's heart-wrenching, because you can see what needs to be done, and you feel like someone has shackled you and tied your arms behind your back and said, okay, now go and do your thing. And a lot of times, very frustrating.
And going back full circle to Glenn's original question, Debbie, did they teach you how to negotiate with political factions to allow fresh drinking water into refugee camps? Do they teach that in medical school? Is that a course you take?
Not even close. Not, and that it remarkable, the number of things that are lacking in that realm as well. Yeah.
Jason, you brought up your idol, Hawkeye Pierce, and I remember watching MASH also. That was part of our medical training. We had to watch that. But every once in a while, I remember a show where an enemy came in as a victim, and all of the medical staff, there was a little bit of the political part, but when you got down to the doctors and nurses, they cared for the person as if it was their brother.
Our job is not to see good and evil, only healthy. And I speak on behalf of all physicians.
Did you ever have episodes where you would take someone who was an oppressor and work with them and try and help them? And do
Are
you know?
Are you talking about taking care of inner city skinheads in Atlanta? Or are you talking about taking care of the rival ethnic group overseas?
You know, based on the way you're leading this today, I would like to go overseas. I'd like to go overseas.
I think we've all had experiences where we're taking care of someone that and sometimes you gotta dig deep for the compassion. It's hard. You gotta dig deep because you know that the person you're caring for is probably not a very good person. But that's not for me to decide. I'm just there to take care of their medical problems and to make sure that they're healthier, and leave for judges, for juries, whatever your spirituality is, to decide. It's hard, and that's the stuff that we sit around drinking warm beer around the hurricane lamp after a good solid 14-hour day in shedding tears about, because sometimes the people that are part of the problem get very good medical care, but that's not for us to decide, and that should never be decided in the operating theater or in the clinic.
I think
that's a tough one. Those are the ones that haunt you.
That's true, but we did get some training in that, because I remember, in fact, at one point, there would always be the possibility that I might get the victim of a sexual assault and the perpetrator at the same time. They were both in the emergency department at the same time, and we had to treat them equally with as much compassion and let the other systems take care of that.
When I was at Grady, in Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, we used to always say the life you save will be the same one that threatens you in the parking lot when they get out of the hospital.
Boy, that's true.
And that's, but it's the right thing to do, and that's why we do it. We're healers. We heal. We don't judge. We heal.
Judge, yeah.
Debbie, any thoughts?
Once again, I completely concur. It's when it's a child, it's even more difficult. But you have to step back and recognize that your job, as Jason said, is to heal, and not to get in the middle of it, because if you get injured, whatever, you are of no use to anybody else if you place yourself in that position. So along with the mindfulness that Jason was talking about is first, do no harm, and that means taking care of all comers.
Well, you both have opened our eyes today as to how medicine can be practiced and how the world exists, and you've brought it very interestingly into the idea that all of it is local in a way, and we're all people trying to do the best we can, and we happen to have certain skills, others have other skills, and if we all just put them into the same focus, it might be a better world, and I know you're both part of that. We're coming to the close of our show, and with both of your experiences, I'm really looking forward to the health tips that you might come up with. So, Debbie, I'll start with you.
She giggles.
Well, I'm feeling so banal compared to what we were just talking about.
I know. You're talking about toothbrushing or wearing seatbelts? What?
Make sure you eat your fruits and vegetables. Okay, I have two, and one. So, Glenn, we were talking about this earlier. Just very briefly, that when people look towards lifestyle changes, it always seems so overwhelming. And I always preach, again, baby steps. And so, even if it's just getting up off your couch during the commercials, that's a place to start. Don't go to the kitchen, but just get up off the couch and move a little. Eat a little less. Don't deprive yourself. You can have pizza, just don't eat the whole pizza. That sort of thing. And then my second one, and it is just a personal pet peeve of mine, is that we can put a man on the moon, but we can't cure the common cold, and neither can a Z-Pack. So when you do catch your cold, don't get upset with your physician if they don't prescribe you an antibiotic, because they are doing what's in your best interest and for the community at large.
Oh, I like that.
Wow, I'm almost tempted to repeat that second one as my answer, just for repetition emphasis.
Hey, that was my health tip also. I was going to say that. Okay, Jason.
If I had to pick up my two tips, in 1948, the World Health Organization defined health. What is health? What is this thing that we're trying to achieve? it's not merely the absence of disease, but a state of complete physical, psychological, and social well-being. That's health. That's the goal. That's the goal at the end of the day. And I think it'd be easy for us as emergency physicians to say, you need to floss more, you need to exercise more, you need to walk instead of drive. I think I give Americans a lot more, people in general, a lot more credit. We kind of know what it is we need to do, but we choose not to. And a lot of times those choices are hand as forces because of the social circumstances. Like, you can't go down to inner city LA and tell people you need to exercise more when there's gangs in their neighborhood. You can't say, I want you to walk to work when they're living in that neighborhood. And I get that. And I think the big piece of advice I would give is that don't end up in the emergency department. The lifestyle choices you need to make to not end up in the emergency department. I feel like the day I'm out of work as an emergency physician is a good day. And I know if Bob is listening to this, I'm sure I'm getting called into his office tomorrow. But I really do believe that as someone whose career has been dedicated to reacting to when things go bad, there's so many opportunities to prevent that at so many stages ahead of time. And I think the second piece, to go along and just to give a philosophical twist to what Debbie said, because don't go to your physician expecting antibiotics. I, as a physician, have taken an oath to improve the quality of health for the individual in front of me and for the community I serve. And I do it in ways that are, with the best evidence we have, are effective. Sometimes you're going to disagree with me. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay if you don't like me and I'm not your friend, but I will always tirelessly advocate for your health. And sometimes in this consumer-driven culture where people rate their physicians on Yelp, sometimes people come to the emergency room and I don't give them what they want, but I do try to give them what makes them healthier. And sometimes that means telling them, you don't need antibiotics. Like Debbie said, what you need to do is go out and exercise more and eat healthier.
Before we, thank you both for your extra health tips. That was great. We got 2 from each of you. This is an amazing show today.
Shall we go for 3?
I think everything they've said so far has been sort of a health tip in a way. Do either of you have anything, when you were preparing for this show, is there anything that you haven't gotten to say that you want to bring out?
I would just recommend that the viewers get involved. The great secret of humanitarian medicine, whether you're talking about international or local, the great secret is that it's easy to do. It's very, the opportunities are so common and so easy to obtain, and get involved in a way that you can. Whether you're going to get involved donating your time, donating your money, donating your voice and writing letters to your policymakers, it's easy to make a difference. And that's the big secret, is that everyone thinks that people like Debbie or I are heroes, and we're not. We're actually regular, ordinary people who have just refused to allow these disparities to result in people becoming unhealthy and want to do our part to address it. So that would be my one little take-home point.
Excellent. Debbie?
Awesome. Again, I concur. And, I was thinking about this, reading your questions, Glenn, and it occurred to me, it has always been a privilege to practice medicine, a privilege. And yet what I find, when you step outside of yourself to help another, and, whether that's in your own backyard or in another country, I'll just speak for myself. It's when I'm at my happiest. And I think there are a lot of spiritual writers who do write about that. But it really, we all know that no amount of money is going to make you happy. But when you reach your hand out to another who can't do it for themselves, and affect their life in some way, you hope, or maybe not, but that is also a privilege. And I think that people will find, once they do that that's where they find genuine happiness and joy.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
World-class medicine, world-class doctors. I'm grateful to our very, very special guests, Dr. Debbie Weinstein and Dr. Jason Prstowski, for sharing their wisdom, experiences, and expertise with us. I would also like to thank all of my teachers and healers for allowing me to be where I am today, and thanking Christina and Segovia and Yoga Hub for all of the work that they do, and our viewers for continuous support for us. Looking forward to getting together on another tour in the healthcare galaxy on Magical Medical Tour. But until that time, thank you both, Debbie and Jason, and I wish you all optimal health.
Yes,
Thanks,
of
Glenn.
course. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason and Debbie. We're really honored to have you both on the show. It's magnificent. And I feel like the stories can keep going on and on over that pint of beer, right? And of course, to you, Dr. Glenn Woolman, thank you so much for honoring us again. The wonderful, wonderful show today. And of course, to each and every one of you for joining us in this new platform of education and information. We're grateful for your continuous support, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can serve you better. We invite you to join us for our other shows as well through yogahub.tv, such as Trinity of Life, Flowing into Awareness with Anatara. And again, you can reach Dr. Glenn Woolman simply by following him on Twitter at Glenn Woolman. And of course, through his own website, glennwoolman.com, where I really encourage you to learn about his metaphor square breath. And we always look forward to any feedback or suggestions that you might have. And be sure to leave us your contact information. Give us a call at 818-LETS-TALK. 818-LETS-TALK. And until next time, namaste.